The only thing that matters is that we're here.
That's right.
So, what do you guys want to talk about?
Grace.
Grace. That's all there is.
Did you get any feedback from Wednesday night from anybody? Micah 6?
I don't think so.
I was surprised because that was so incredible, and I didn't get any. I think I got one comment on the YouTube page, and that was it.
Yeah. You're either going to love mercy or you're going to love condemnation.
Yeah.
Right? And be careful with what judgment you meet, for whatever judgment you meet is what will come back to you. Meaning that if you love condemnation, you better believe that that condemnation is going to also condemn you. It won't just be that it condemns other people, it will condemn you. Right? And if you love mercy, man, at first you swim around in the place where you're just so excited about the mercy for yourself. Right? But then you think that's the greatest thing. Right? But then as you sit with God for a while, what starts to happen is your heart becomes filled with mercy towards other people. And man, as nice as it felt when you realized God was full of mercy towards you, listen, man, that pales in comparison to what it feels like when you find your heart filled with mercy towards other people. And other people that are like, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, walking off the road, right? Or even filled with the poison of asps, right? And you find yourself filled with compassion for them. You don't find yourself filled with a judgment of them, right?
It's interesting because, I don't know, your all personal experience, but mine is, I used to walk out of church, and when there was a message of condemnation, I think, man, that was a good message.
I know who needs that.
Send that CD so I can send it out, right?
All of the people in the congregation, I hope they heard.
That's right. So true.
Y'all, listen, I was at church one time, a long time ago, and I heard a guy walk up to the pastor and say, listen, preacher, if you ain't making us feel guilty, you ain't doing your job.
Right. But it's so much better living
crazy?
In mercy than in condemnation.
There's something very wrong with that.
Something desperately wrong.
And what's sad is that's the system we implement in raising our kids.
Right.
We think if we're going to get our kids to behave right, we're going to now use the tool of shame, guilt. We're going to try to manipulate the proper behavior out of them. Right?
Yeah.
My son is in town this weekend, and he moved up to the Bible Belt, North Mississippi, and people he's living with persuaded him to go to church, so he started going to church. And he said, Mom, the last time I went to that church was when I heard the youth pastor tell a 7-year-old, if you don't pray, you're going to hell. And confronted him about it, and he said, why did you lie to him? And he said, I'm not sure I'll ever walk through another church door. I said, thank you, Jesus. So I invited him this morning. I'm like, hey, we're hanging out from 9 to 10 if you want to come hang out with us. So,
I mean, God's got me going through a growth spot where I'm figuring out that the mercy and the grace thing liberates me. Like, I don't have to hold on to that. I can allow people to be who they are and, do what they're going to do, and be okay with them and be okay with who they are and just love them through it. You know what I'm saying? Even if it's the wrong or whatever, the grace that I have today is sustaining for me, so therefore when they see that in me, hopefully that'll encourage them to get out of that way of thinking, the condemnation thing.
It's hard to control the world, too.
I don't know if you're
trying to do it.
It don't matter how good your ideas are,
Yeah.
and it may be good ideas, but no matter what your thoughts are, what your beliefs are, what your plan is, what you're going to do to this world to affect the way it is very minimal.
That's right.
The only thing you can affect is what's inside of you, and let it have its effect.
And let it have its effect.
Yeah, there's the key right there.
And why do we feel so happy, Jay, when we heard a message of condemnation like that and we thought that's what we needed to hear? I mean, do we actually think that within our flesh is the ability to bring forth life?
Well, at the time when
That's
I was
right.
in
We
that
fall
church,
victim to that.
absolutely. Right?
That's what we thought, right?
Yeah, we were working hard at
Yeah.
it, right? And it was really frustrating.
We
Yeah.
thought we really needed to be straightened out.
I think we already believed that. We were bad
Yes.
already, and
Yeah.
this is what we needed. And,
Yeah.
Right.
That's what we deserve,
yeah,
too.
exactly.
Well, if you think about when Satan came to Adam and he offered the tree in the knowledge of good and evil, and Eve looked at it and said, hey, this actually looks good to eat.
Yeah.
We often think the tree is just a bad thing, but actually it looked like wisdom, and it looked like I can obtain life by partaking from that tree. You know.
Which tree? With this tree here?
Oh, that tree, that rock tree, that wall would never be knocked down.
So here's a quick anecdote. I'll interrupt you for 2 seconds. When Cindy was painting that, I said, "No, that tree's got to look ugly." Oh, wait, no, that tree's got to look really good.
But it is with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It does look good. So in other words, when what is preached out there is that you need to do this and stop doing that. There's an element in you like that makes some logical sense.
Right.
But the thing I'm finding more and more is it's not only about where Jesus says that I judge no man according to the flesh. So when Jesus looks at us, he's not looking at us through the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Mm-hmm. He's looking at us through the tree of life. Yeah. But something that, I think over the last few months that I've really been just thinking and pondering on is that so often I might see it that God views me through the tree of life, but I actually view myself through the tree and the knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah. Right.
And so the thing is like when you begin to see yourself through not partaking from that wisdom, you don't judge yourself according to the flesh, then you begin to see things happen in you and you see life differently, and then you can begin to have compassion on yourself and also for other people.
Yeah.
So it's God. On one hand, it's like God doesn't judge you according to the flesh, and also he doesn't judge you according to the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, but it's also saying, hey, Father, if that's how you see life, help me understand how I'm to view myself.
Right.
And then out of that place, I can then have compassion and love and mercy and understand everything I see going on in this world and what is afflicting people and how people are viewing things. And you begin to not judge people according to the flesh. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the knowledge of good and evil. You can know what is good and evil. There's a difference between knowing good and evil and living by the knowledge of good and evil. Those are two different things.
Yeah.
Right? And why do those kinds of messages make sense to us? Why does the tree of the knowledge of good and evil look good to us?
It sounds good.
Because we want life.
Yeah. Right.
And especially now, why do those messages that are filled with condemnation, why do they sound good to us? Because we already know what's good and evil. We know it's good to have life, and we know it's evil not to have life. Yeah. We know the fruit of life is good, and the fruit of life is evil. So the moment we're confronted with that type of a logic, the reason we're so agreeable is because we hear the person talk about the fruit of life, and that's what should be coming out of us, and we all agree, yeah, the fruit of life is good. And then we hear the guy talk about the fruit of death, and how the fruit of death shouldn't be coming out of us, and we all agree, because we all agree the fruit of death is evil.
Right.
Because we all know now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We all know that now. And so God also knows what is good and evil. The difference is he doesn't live by it.
Yeah.
Right? And so what happened to man wasn't just that they knew what was good and evil, it's that they began to live by that knowledge of what is good and evil. Because what will happen is that knowledge is full of annoyances and labors.
Yes.
It will agitate your soul because it will cause you to judge everything by life and death. Meaning if you see life, you judge something to be good. If you see death, you judge it to be evil. Right?
Yeah.
Well, what do you think we see every day in ourselves and in the world? Death. So what do we judge about it? It's evil. What do we judge about ourselves? It's evil. And then the preacher comes and talks about how that's evil. And yes, it's evil. Because we all know that death is evil. Right?
Yes.
And so God, the way God got it right to switch that around is, it's what Paul talked about. We live by the knowledge of the Son of God. Mm-hmm. We live by the faith known as Jesus Christ. Yeah. Right? And so we can know what is good and evil, but we don't live by the knowledge of what is good and evil. We live by the knowledge of the Son of God. And that's why we condemned ourselves so badly when we saw the fruit of the flesh manifest in us. We didn't need someone to come and tell us that isn't good. We all inherently know that it isn't good. Why is it that when we saw the works of the flesh manifest in us that we didn't like it? Why don't we like it? Why aren't we just like, who cares? Why is it that we don't like death? Did somebody have to teach you it wasn't good? Did somebody have to teach you that death wasn't good? I promise you, the first time I fell down and broke my arm or broke my leg and I saw death manifest there, my parents didn't have to come and sit me down and tell me, well, that's not very good. They didn't have to tell me it doesn't feel nice. And then I was like, you're right, it doesn't feel nice. No, like immediately. I knew this isn't right. Something is wrong here.
Right.
And so we inherently know that now because the knowledge of good and evil entered the earth. And so Adam, it's not that he didn't see he was naked. He saw that he wasn't wearing clothes, but he didn't think there was anything wrong with that. He didn't think there was anything wrong with not being clothed. Because his conscience wasn't corrupted with the knowing of good and evil. And then he eats from the knowledge of good and evil. His conscience becomes corrupted by it. And now he sees himself as not being clothed. And not being clothed means not having life. Or not being clothed with life. And in fact, the nakedness, you could actually describe it as being clothed upon with death. And so immediately he judged that to be evil. He judged it to be no good. And so then what did that do to him? It immediately took him captive. To what? To try to rectify the thing he said wasn't good. And then guess what? Within his own flesh is not the ability to produce what is good. So now he enlists his flesh to clothe upon himself with the life that he says is good, because death is evil, and he sees the death that he's clothed in, and he says that must mean that he's evil. And so now he enlists his flesh to try to do it. You see how that knowledge took him captive to labor and toiling? What do we see going on in the world today? People see George Floyd die. And they see that he died at the hands of a police officer. Well, guess what? Everybody knows that's not good. Everybody knows that's not good. Now, there's a difference between knowing that death isn't right and living by the knowing. Right? Am I going to find life by the fact that I know that isn't right? Or am I going to find life by the knowledge of the Son of God? You see, what the world is doing is just like Adam. Their conscience is corrupted with the knowledge of good and evil. They clearly see that isn't good, and then that knowledge that that's death, that knowledge that that's not right, that knowledge that that's unjust is the same as Adam's nakedness being uncovered. And so it's like their nakedness is uncovered. And so then it's filled with labors. That knowing that that's not right is filled with labors if you live by the knowing that it's not right. And it will take you captive to laboring, trying to bring forth justice, trying to clothe upon yourself. Right? But if you live by the knowledge of the Son of God, you won't be taken captive to labors and annoyances. And actually what you'll come and do is you'll come and speak of what God has done to clothe upon us. Right? You'll actually come with a word that will convince the people in that type of dynamic that they've been clothed upon by God. Right. The Lamb come to take away the death of the world. And you'll start talking about that. That's actually the only way you can do justice in the midst of an unjust situation. That's actually the only thing that will put the anxiety in someone's soul to rest. That's called living by the knowledge of the Son of God. Right? And so we know what is good and evil. And not only do we know what is good and evil, but Hebrews comes and says that we can discern good from evil now. That's not talking about life and death there. That's not talking about us discerning that it's good to do this or bad to do that. It's talking about us being able to discern the wisdom that is evil and the wisdom that is good. And so I can discern when a thing is filled with labors and annoyances. And I can immediately see that's evil. Like all the things people are doing to try to bring forth justice by their own strength. All the things people are doing to try to take life by force. My heart immediately tells me that is filled with labors and annoyances. My heart immediately tells me that that is what comes forth from the knowledge, living by the knowledge of good and evil. And I judge that type of a wisdom to be from below and not to be from above. Yeah. Right? Because I see that the knowledge of God, the faith that came in the person of Jesus Christ, the only faith that can serve us with justice or justify us or give us the justice that we want, I see that faith is not filled with labors and annoyances. I see that faith does not engender bitter envying and strife. I see that faith will actually put a person to rest. It will actually serve the person with the justice that their heart says they long for when the systems in the world comes and uncovers our nakedness. Right? So the world is like Adam. And I promise you, we'll just use America. America is Adam. Right? We're man. Adam is a picture of man. Adam's not just trying to tell us a nice story about himself. God's trying to give us discernment about our own lives. Yes. So that we can begin to see it from the outside looking in and get wisdom. You have the two Adams where you're supposed to do that with. Well, America's like Adam. This thing with George Floyd goes down, and that's like all of our nakedness being uncovered. And there we are naked. Now I can discern in that place of nakedness what is good and what is evil, because I can see that man can't clothe upon their nakedness through the strength of their own hands. And I can see that a mind that is filled with labor and toiling to be clothed upon is actually devilish, it's sensual, it's carnal, it's from below. And I don't just judge it to be evil in the sense of like it's Dracula, but something in my heart says it can't clothe me.
Yeah.
It's not that it can, and that it's just more laborious, it's that it can't clothe me, and not only, it isn't just that it can't clothe me, it's that it will bring forth more injustice. Should I look to that to be clothed upon in the midst of my nakedness being uncovered? Because it says that Adam brought forth thorns and thistles. And so Adam tried to clothe upon himself. He needed justice. He said, it's not right for me to be naked. It's not right that my nakedness was uncovered. This is unjust. And he wasn't living by the knowledge of God. He was living by the knowledge of good and evil. So he didn't just know good and evil, he was living by that knowledge. So then it compelled him. Living by that knowledge of good and evil will compel you to enlist your flesh to be clothed upon. And I see the reason why that wisdom, that living by the knowledge of good and evil, the reason why that wisdom is evil and devilish and carnal and sensual is because not only will it not clothe me from the injustice I see and the pain that I feel, but it will actually heap more injustice upon it. The injustice that's already there. But you see, there's a way that seems right to a man. And the end thereof is death, it says. What is the way that seems right to us? We're going to bring justice ourselves. We're going to take justice by force. We're going to take the kingdom of God by force. All of us intuitively know that the kingdom of God is filled with love and life and peace and joy. That's why Paul said the Gentiles who didn't have the law had a law written on their heart. What was he saying? He was saying their conscience has also been filled with the knowing of good and evil. And so when they see the fruit of death come out of them, their conscience condemns them and says that's not right. And so we can all see that.
So do you think, just a quick question, do you think that inherently the tree of knowledge of good and evil in itself is not evil, just like flesh is like neutral? So in other words, like God knows about the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, and actually when Adam, the tree was there before sin entered in the world, and part of us being made in the likeness and image of God, and also I think it showed the vulnerability of God, that we are in his image, that we're able to know that there is a tree of knowledge of good and evil, but we don't partake from it. Can you see the difference? So often we can think of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil as an evil thing, rather than actually we're made in the image of God, so we actually have, we're aware of it, but we don't partake from it. Is that, does that make it?
Yeah, and what I would say is, with the things that I would consider in a way, is that was the tree corrupted from the time it was made and the time that the Eve and Adam ate from it? Was it corrupted, or did it stay the same? And then what I would consider is, do I need to have knowledge of what is good and what is evil to actually partake of life? And I don't know that you do.
But does God?
God knows what is good and evil,
but he doesn't know from. He doesn't. His understanding and his wisdom doesn't come from that. He's aware of it.
Yeah, but I don't know that he needs to be aware of it for his life to exist.
Okay.
Is what I would weigh, right? I mean, and I don't know that I would look at it the same for him as for us. But it's an interesting thing to weigh. But the thing that I would weigh about that is do I need to know that not what is good and what is evil to have life? It's a struggle for me to say yes. It's a struggle for me to say that I need that in order to have life. I don't know about that. And then I think just from the scriptures, and I think about when I was a little child, I didn't need to know it was good to have life and it was evil not to have life for me to enjoy the life my parents provided for me. I was kind of just innocently enjoying it. And so what I would say is that in light of, because God said don't eat from it. He didn't say that, well, you need to know what this is.
And that's before sin even entered into the world.
Right.
So he said don't eat from that tree, because the day you
Which
eat
would
from
be
that tree,
to know it.
Yeah, so the day you eat from that, you will surely die.
Yeah.
And what is that,
So it's kind of like God is not wanting their conscience to even be corrupted with that kind of thinking. I think the question, though, is, and people that have been here long enough know what I think. I think the tree was corrupted, right? I think the wisdom was corrupted. Right? Does that make sense about what? You see how I just discerned all this stuff with George Floyd by looking at Adam? Do you see how I did that?
Yeah.
Do you see how that's what it's like for us?
Yeah.
We want to start connecting these things because it'll help us dwell in discernment. Whenever we encounter something that isn't born from life, guess what's happening to us? Our nakedness is being uncovered. Okay? Well, guess what? We know what is good and what is evil. So let us recognize the effect that knowledge wants to have on us. It wants to take us captive to laboring to try to bring forth life. That's what it wants to do. And that's the voice of the stranger. We want to have discernment, man. I mean, listen, how long is it we've been walking in the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ? Like Paul said, we're no longer ignorant to the devices of the serpent to where we can be beguiled. Man, we want to start understanding, how does this knowledge affect us? Right? And we want to see the way it affects us is when we see death or the fruit of death or injustices or anything that isn't right, we can't stand it.
Yeah,
like
our
Costanza.
flesh kicks in. It's like
Yeah,
we want to sort this out.
Costanza.
Yeah.
This is why it's so deceptive. It's
Yeah.
true that death isn't right.
Yes.
This is why it's so logical to us to think that we're going to rectify it.
Yes.
Because it's actually true that death isn't right. It's actually true that it's unjust what happened to George Floyd. Those things are true. That's why the scripture says there's a way that seems right unto a man. The reason it seems right unto us is because we know it's true that that's not right.
Yeah.
That death isn't right. That the fruit of death isn't right. We know it's not right. That's why we're so easily deceived. Right? And so we want to understand that dynamic and what it does to us. We don't want to just be la 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 la. Well, the only thing God said was not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But who cares what that is? And who cares how it impacts us? We don't need to know about that. Rather, let us continue to be judges of our evil thoughts. And let us continue to be judges of the evil thoughts of other people. And let us love condemnation instead of mercy. And let us continue to live by the strength of our own flesh, all the time wanting justice, and all the time bringing more injustice to the injustice we want fixed. Let us keep living like that. Let us continue to be ignorant.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
I mean, listen, that's what it's like. I want to say it again. The knowledge of good and evil. Back in Genesis, it says that God said, "Let there be light." And the light entered into the earth. And when you look at that in the ancient Hebrew, it says, and the light separated the darkness.
Yes.
And God said that that was good. It was good for the light to separate the darkness. God said the man has become like one of us, knowing good from evil. And so what did God know in Genesis when the light entered the earth and it separated the darkness? That light was good and darkness was evil.
Yeah.
And what is light and dark in the scriptures? Life and death.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Wow.
And so the knowledge of good and evil is that I know that life is good. And I know that evil is bad. And now, how does that affect me that when I know that? What does that do to me when I see it? Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you figured it out yet, but you're in a world where by one man, Adam, death entered.
Yeah.
And so you're in a world that's all the time filled with death.
Right.
In fact, you're actually clothed in a dust body right now.
Dust.
And that body is perishing. And why do you think you get so upset when you see something wrong with this body? Why do you think it bothers us so much? Why aren't we just like, who cares?
For death.
Who cares? Who cares? Because it's not right. We all have this intuitive thing that it's not right. Now, what are we? It agitates our souls. The agitation of the soul is what comes from the knowledge of good and evil. And the agitation of the soul is for our soul to be taken from rest. And for us to be filled with the life of laboring and toiling. This is what God said. You're going to live by the sweat of your brow, Adam. Now that your mind has been corrupted with the knowledge of what is good and what is evil, it's going to take you captive, and you're going to try to establish life, the good, by your own flesh, by the strength contained in your own hand. And then he goes on to say, but you're going to bring forth thorns and thistles when you do that. That's what's going to happen, man. That's the same things that happens to us. So listen, guys, when we encounter death, let us understand this dynamic. It's okay that we know that death is evil, but let us understand what that tries to do to us. Let us see that in this hand is not contained the strength to rectify death and injustice. Right. So in that moment, let us not live by the knowledge of the Son of God. We know what it is, but let us not try to find life by that. Let us live by the knowledge of Jesus. I think I said that backwards. Let us live by, let us not live by the knowledge of good and evil in that place.
Right.
Let us know that the death is evil, but then when we know that that's evil and unjust, let us then look to the knowledge of the Son of God. Because you know what that will do? Just like God came and clothed Adam. Do you know what will happen? We'll be clothed in that place where we feel nakedness.
Yes.
Right? Now, once we're clothed in that place where we feel nakedness, once we're served with justice, once we see the justice God served us with, that will bring rest to our souls. Guess what that can happen then? You can start to think like God in the midst of an unjust situation. You can start to see things like God in the midst of an unjust situation. And should there be any wisdom, should there be any good thing that can come about in the midst of that situation, that's when it will come forth out of you by God's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you see how that works?
Yeah.
That's the way the two dynamics works. And that's why it's so deceptive. And that's why, listen, man, I can clearly see people, the Adam man, raging in the world right now, right? And I got to be honest, I don't feel like they can take from me or steal from me. But you know what I feel? I feel it's not right that this is happening to them. That's what I feel. And when I feel it's not right that this is happening to them, I see that the world doesn't possess the solution to satisfy what's bringing forth the rage in them. I see the only thing that will satisfy what's bringing forth the rage in them is the knowledge of the Son of God. And so I come and stand. And I come and stand for them and for all people in the face of that thing. And I declare that by one man, Jesus, the death that was serving us with injustice has been conquered. And God has established a life for us that will serve us with justice. That's all we really want. We want a life that can serve us with the justice we say is right. Well, guess what? The life that's in the world can't serve you with the justice that you say is right. The only life that can serve you with the justice that you say is right is the life of God, eternal life.
Amen.
And then you see that and you standing, and that's when you're actually effecting a real protest. Because you're protesting against the death that's in the world. That's what's warring against these people. That's what's filling them with rage. They don't need somebody to come and stand against the fruit of death. Jesus said, I didn't come to make clean the outside of the cup. They need someone that's going to come and stand against the death itself and declare against that. Well, Jesus come and did that. He stood against the death that was warring against us, and he warred against it. Right? And that's what the people in the world need. Right?
It's a different kingdom where Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world. Because if you think back to Jesus and what he was facing and the political scene around there, they're like, well, what are you going to do about this? And he's like, my kingdom is different to this. My kingdom is the way that this situation can be resolved is completely different.
Completely different.
It's total opposites. And to the logical, carnal mind, it makes no freaking sense.
Right.
Because something in you is like, man, we gotta do something. We gotta enlist this. And
They'll
I'll
even try to
work
make
out.
you ashamed. If
Yeah.
you come talking the knowledge of the Son of God.
Yeah.
Right? That's why Paul come and said, I'm not ashamed.
And then condemn you for feeling like you don't have to do anything.
Right.
Oh, yeah. That's what it does. Well, that's part of the knowledge of good and evil.
Why aren't you doing anything?
It wants to take you captive.
It's
too.
already been done, brother.
It wants to take you captive.
Yeah.
Right? And that's exactly right. Listen, the way Simon beautifully said that, one of the reasons they rejected Jesus because they wanted him to come as a political Messiah.
Yeah.
And by political, what I mean is the Jews were being oppressed by the Romans. Their whole culture was racist. We think we got racism in America. Listen, guys, we ain't got no racism in America in comparison to the racism they had going on. And they wanted Jesus to come and take up a war against Rome. Because they said the problem is Rome. Look at all the injustices that Rome is serving us with. Now the Messiah is going to come. And the Messiah is going to rectify all the injustices by warring against Rome. And Jesus didn't even come and say a single word about Rome.
No.
Before Jesus was crucified.
Oh yeah.
They were crucifying in public.
That's right.
The Romans against the Jews before Jesus.
They were doing heinous things to kill the Jews.
This is my
Heinous things. And so Jesus comes Go read the Gospels.
Yeah.
You don't see him talking about Rome. And it's not because he's indifferent or insensitive. But what did he say? I didn't come to clean the outside of the cup.
Yeah.
And see, he saw that even should I come and deal with Rome, they're still dead on the inside. They're still dead. And that's the real injustice. Even should I wipe Rome off the map, these guys are still dying. And they'll raise up people within themselves to crucify themselves.
That's good.
Right? And so he came filled with actual compassion and dealt with the root. Because he saw it's the root that needs to be taken down. I come to make clean the inside of the cup. Because that's actually the only thing that can save you. Right? From the days that you live while you're in the world and forevermore. Right? Listen, you can't be saved from injustice by the world acting right.
No, it's as if the fruit of death around us acts as a fertilizer to the root of the wisdom of Satan in our lives that is still there and causes it to grow that we might bear more fruit of death.
That's a good analogy.
That's a great analogy.
That's exactly how it goes. That's exactly how it goes.
It's like a compost pile of the fruit of death.
It's a wicked cycle.
Yeah.
The wisdom brings forth death. You see the death, you don't like the death, you enlist your strength to try to heal the death.
Right.
That brings forth more death. Yeah. It's like a circular.
Miracle grow.
That's right.
You know, that's kind of crazy. Like yesterday, I did a garden, and we were digging up to plant new stuff, right? And I start digging up, and I'm digging up caulking guns, sheet metal, all kind of stuff in this guy's garden. And I bring him out, and I said, "This is why nothing can grow. It's because of trash that they left in your garden. We got to clean all this out first before we can get it to grow." Just makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It does.
No, that's exactly what it is.
That's it.
So we know what is good and what is evil now. We do. We become like God.
Yeah.
Right? We see that the light is good and the darkness is evil. But we're not going to live by that knowledge. We're going to live by the knowledge of the Son of God. What does that knowledge tell you? God showed up and clothed you. God served you justice when he conquered death. Right? And you could go on and on from there. God's vindicated you from the world.
And that's the truth of, when you think about the kingdom, you see Jesus talk about the kingdom a lot, and then you see scriptures like, I forget where it is, but it says, the kingdom is forcibly advancing and those who are forceful will take hold of it. We got this screwed idea that we're like, okay, if we look at it from the knowledge of tree of good and evil, we're like, okay, there's injustice in the world, there's poverty in the world. Now what are we going to do about it? Now we're going to enlist our members in order to deal with the kingdom, and God's system is completely upside down to that. And that's not saying we don't get involved and do things, but it's from a completely different standpoint, completely different viewpoint of how the kingdom is advanced. So, I mean,
we want to take the kingdom by force.
We want to take it, and we can't.
And that's what brings forth violence, guys. I mean, one of the listen, we love our worldly cliches. We think they sound so smart. God helps those who help themselves. I mean, we love it, right? We're like, yeah. And then we see nice little quips, and I hate to pick on this current thing. We're not picking on the people that have suffered injustice. But these little quips are against the people that have suffered injustice, actually. They're actually the same tree that brings forth violence. But the cute little signs that say silence is violence. No. The Bible says the violent are those who try to take life by force. Those who try to take life by force are the ones that are filled with violence. The fruit of violence, the fruit of hatred, actually comes from people trying to take life by force. That's what brings forth violence. You see, Jesus never tried to take justice by force. He never tried to take life by force. He rested in God to give it to him, right? He said, justice isn't found but by me taking it by force. That's why when Peter whipped out the sword and tried to cut off the guy's ear, what did Jesus say? He who tries to find life by the sword will actually find death by the sword. The sword is taking it by force. Trying to take it by force. That's why Jesus said, up until now, the kingdom of God suffered violence. Because the violent have tried to take it by force. Who were the violent? The Pharisees. How are they trying to take it? By their ability to perform the works of the law. By their ability to make beautiful the outside of the cup. with their large phylacteries and their beautiful tassels, you know, and their tassels would look real good. And by praying in the square, publicly, so everyone could see their righteousness. And what did Jesus say? Don't be like the hypocrites who are praying out in public. Now, hypocrite means something different. That's just saying that they're filled with hypocrisy. Right. It's not a demeaning term. It means the wisdom they're dwelling in produces hypocrisy in them. Right? They act one way, and the way that they're acting is actually contrary to what they think in other ways. And the two things are conflicting. Right?
I feel conflict because from the time I can remember as a little child, it was always, this isn't right, this isn't right, this isn't right. I mean, a lot of things happened to me as a child that weren't right. And so I grew up with such a strong sense of what's right and what's wrong, and I'm still struggling with it every day. I mean, I see things every day and I say, that's not right. So even though I'm learning the truth, I still, I mean, it's still so much a part of who I am, or I mean, it comes so naturally for me to say, that's not right, whether it's something big or something little. Mm-hmm. You know, like, I get upset when my grandkids don't say thank you. You know, they need to say thank you, or they need to say please. I mean, who cares if they say please and thank you? It's really not that important. But I'm frustrated with myself because that's still such a huge part of what goes through my thoughts on a daily basis. That's not right. You know, the shoulds and the shouldn'ts. And I don't want to have that in me.
So that's you know, and we'll be now there, like where it's so easy to judge yourself, like getting back to what I said about judging yourself according to the flesh.
Right.
And so that's something I'm just constantly saying, God, help me with this, because you see life this way, God.
Right.
I'm not quite seeing it.
Yeah.
Help me in my weakness.
Right.
And not thinking, hey, I've got to now go and enlist my ability to try and not think that way. I just say, hey, God, this is how you see it. Help me with my unbelief.
Because we can't
and
fix it.
help me.
He's gotta change it for us. Because we can't enlist our own strength to change, you know, our
that
actions.
willpower don't work.
Is it okay that you don't think it's right? I don't think the problem is that you don't think it's right. That's not the problem. I think God would first ask you and say, is it okay, Cindy, if you don't think it's right? For them not to say, because like we just said, the issue isn't whether or not you think the thing is right. The issue is, what do you do when you're confronted with the thought that something isn't right? Do you get with God?
Right.
And you start talking with God about the knowledge of Jesus Christ? Mm-hmm. Do you sit with God and process that feeling? Or do you go off condemning yourself for having that thought? Because I promise you, God's not condemning you because you're thinking that. But Cindy, maybe ask yourself with God and hear God's voice say to you, is it okay that you don't think it's right that they don't say that? Is it okay that you think it's good for them to say those things? Because like we just said, there's a difference between thinking that and then living by it. Yeah. And I think it's okay if you feel that. I don't think that suggests there's something wrong with you. I think we all feel that. Listen, I've been walking in grace since '96 now. There's still times where, listen, I'm completely overwhelmed today because there's so many things going on in here that I feel aren't right. And today I thought, how can I even preach? Because everything just feels so discombobulated. I don't feel like there's something wrong with me for feeling like that. But in dwelling in that place, I realize there's grace or strength for me in the knowledge of the Son of God. And so I connect with God in that place, right? I don't judge, because the moment you come in with the judgment, what's wrong with you that you think that way?
I should know better by now.
The moment you come with that, guess what that's like? That's like Adam running and hiding from God.
Yeah.
You see, you're dwelling in condemnation now. Mm-hmm. And God is not dwelling in the place where he's condemning you. And so then that kind of is like a sign of you dwelling over there in your own thoughts. Feeling like, look at me. right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas God would come and sit with you and be like, it's okay.
You know, I think about Jesus. I mean, if Jesus is our high priest and he can sympathize in every single way, till his last breath, the temptation of, well, what are you going to do about it? Or you shouldn't be thinking like this and that. But he didn't come to that. Do you know what I mean? That came at him, because I think when we have all those thoughts come at us, it's easy to go feeling condemned, beat up. But then when you talk to God about it, and like Jesus says, I know how you feel. I'm with
Me
you,
too.
100%. I'm
Me
with
too.
you. I feel that. I experience that. I know you. I can totally and utterly relate to you,
So
and it's okay.
Yeah.
And then it's like, help me, God.
It is okay.
It is okay. It's human.
It's okay.
It's just human.
Right, it's okay.
It's by, yeah.
And I would just want to say that it's okay to feel like whatever isn't of life isn't right. And then what am I going to do, though? Living by the knowledge of the Son of God. Listen, I talk a lot about this now because we've been in grace for so long. We're no longer judging ourselves by that metric. There's only one metric we're going to judge ourselves by. It's by what God has said about us in Jesus.
Yes.
And so what's happening there is the world is trying to get you to use a different metric to judge yourself. And now you're like, darn, look at me. It's like you're an artist. It's like it's painting a portrait of you based on you still thinking that's not right. And it's bothering you. And then it paints a picture of you based on that and says, look at yourself, Cindy. What's wrong with you? And God's like, but I'm the master artiste. And look what the picture I painted of you is. Jesus. And that's the metric you use to judge your life. That's the metric you would use to discern the thoughts you have about yourself. Right? And what it'll do is it will cleanse you from those negative feelings. Right? And it will actually take your mind off of whether it happens or not. And if you really want it to stop, and it's from a pure desire, it'll take you to the place where you'll say, Lord, I desire to not think that way anymore in this situation. But I can't do anything about it. Neither can I spend all my days judging myself for it. I'm going to commit that thing into your hands, and if you think that I can be set free from that, then I'm available. Otherwise, I'm done thinking about it. If I feel aggravated after the fact, I'm going to get with God. I'm going to get with you, and we're going to talk about it. But that's the stranger accusing you,
Right.
telling you.
That's not right.
And sometimes it takes, I mean, it can take time. I mean, really can take time. It's almost like, you know, with the painting, it's like one of those pictures and it's like, it looks like nothing. And then it's like, you wake up and then it's like God turns the picture around. You know, like they turn the picture around and it's like, you're like, oh my word, it's like, this is amazing. You know those artists who do that, upside down paintings?
Yes.
And then like God turns around and you're like, okay, nothing to do with me.
That's right.
Nothing to do with me. It's all about you. And God's like, yeah.
So every now and then I get this thought that comes into my mind, and I don't want to forget it, but I'm not in a position to like post that thought on Facebook or whatever. So I'll email myself, okay? And this is what popped into my mind last night that I emailed to myself. It says, to hell with death.
Yeah, that's a standing ovation on that.
And when you think about it, the last enemy, and what it says in the book of Revelations about it, that the last enemy, death, will be cast into the
There you
lake of
go.
fire.
That's it.
Hell with death.
No, that's a great tweet, man. I'm going to tweet that later today. I won't put it on Facebook. I'll let you do that.
I don't need it.
I'll tweet it.
I just want it to be out there, that's all.
I'm going to tweet it because I don't think you have a Twitter account.
I don't think
But you can put it on Facebook if you want.
I just quoted the Bible. To hell with death.
Hell with that.
Okay?
Yeah.
If he complains to me, I'll just point him to the scriptures.
But glory to God. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you guys see all that? Hopefully we didn't move far enough on from the knowledge of good and evil and the impact it tries to have on us that we remember that, right? And when we feel that it's not right, man, see that's our nakedness trying to be uncovered, just like Adam, right?
The knowledge is okay. That was kind of an interesting way to hear it today. Was it's okay. It's okay to have that knowledge. You just don't have to eat the fruit. You can go to God and say, "What?
Yeah,
I've got this knowledge now. What are you going to do about it?" And just that's just a beautiful thing. Like I said years ago, when you said just go talk to God about that. Sometimes I just forget to do that, and I want to go talk to somebody in the world or whatever, and that usually doesn't really help at the end of the day. But when I had a situation yesterday where my heart was pricked hard. And I went off in my bedroom, and I found myself finding something else to do to keep my mind off of it. But really, I was sitting on my bed talking to God, and like, that hurts. Why am I feeling this way? And without thinking myself out of it, without doing anything, I just found that my heart let it go.
Yeah.
And I was able to function but where before that would not have happened. But it wasn't that I went in to do something about it. It was just, gosh, this hurts.
Yep.
And being okay with the fact that it hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, our society is so programmed. We can't let anybody experience discomfort. No. Do you see that that's the same kind of a thing? Discomfort compels us to prevent it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I love what Jim Dixon said to me. Man, I don't know if you guys realize it, but man, I can't stand being in front of people. Like, I feel uncomfortable. And there were times at the beginning of the church where I felt so uncomfortable that I thought I was going to die. That I thought, how can I keep doing this? Right? And, you know, people who loved me were trying to find ways to comfort me. Right? And they didn't know. Right? We want to comfort people. But man, Jim Dixon come up to me and he said, I'm not going to take you down off that cross. Right? And because he saw that the uncomfortableness I was experiencing was me dying to the life that was in the world.
Yeah.
And he saw that even though I felt uncomfortable, life was being worked in me. Right? And so many times we prevent someone from coming to the place where they get a revelation that they were crucified with Christ and they're dead to the world. Because we want to we feel so moved by the pain that we want to get in there and circumvent it and keep it. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Glory to God. I got to try to fix the video.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much.
Glad you could come.